Welcome back to True Crime for Sleep. If you have a thought on this case, leave a comment. And if you want more, like and subscribe. Tonight, you're walking a downtown business hotel at 2:17 a.m. because a guest in 1216 is missing. The night auditor says the room smells wrong, but the door looks fine and the hallway is quiet. You pull the lock on it like it's going to be your spine, and it gives you nothing after 9:42 p.m. No valid key uses, no forced door alarm, no clean little timeline to hang your report on. Inside, the room is staged neat, wallet squared, suitcase half packed, shower run and stopped, like someone paused a life mid-sentence. The deadbolt is thrown from the inside, and still the strike plate has fresh scuffing that doesn't match a normal entry. So you stop trusting the door and start tracing the one system that has to leave a record: the keycard encoder, the wake events, and the lock's clock. What happens to a no-entry timeline when a short-lived credential, a battery brownout, and a lock clock reset collide at 2:03 a.m.? You stand there in the doorway, breathing through your mouth because the smell is sweet in the wrong way. It is not garbage. It is not cologne. It is that warm, damp, organic note that makes your brain reach for denial. And denial is a luxury item, like room service after midnight. The auditor hovers behind you with his tie loosened and his hands folded like prayer. He keeps saying the same sentence, the way people do when they are trying to cast a spell. No one went in, no one went out. The lock report is clean. You look at the deadbolt again. Thrown, hard over, the kind of thing people do when they are alone and want to stay that way. Then you look at the strike plate and you see the scuffing in the metal, silver fresh against dull brass. Congratulations. The door is lying to you, and it is doing it with a straight face. You don't start with the room, you start with the hallway, because the hallway is what connects every mistake to every excuse. You step out and listen. The building has that constant hotel hum, air handling, ice machine cough, elevator cables singing softly in the shaft. You look down the carpet runner and it goes dead straight to the fire doors at either end. No corners to hide in. No shadows deep enough to swallow a body. Which means anything bad that happened here happened quietly or with practice. You make yourself walk slow because if you rush, you miss the details that matter. The first escalation is simple and it lands like a hand on your shoulder. There is a second scuff, lower, near the latch guard, like something thin rode the seam. It is not a kick mark. It is not panic. It is controlled, repeated pressure, like someone trying to open a stubborn jar without waking the house. You call for gloves. You call for an evidence bag big enough for the strike plate, and you tell maintenance to bring tools. The auditor blinks at you, like you just told him you are going to bag the moon. He says that is hotel property. You tell him a missing person is also hotel property, in the way lawsuits work. He doesn't laugh. You don't either. You get your phone light low to the floor and look for the little things people never think about. Fibers, a flake of paint, a smear that does not belong to 1216. The carpet looks vacuumed, like someone wanted to erase the story their shoes told. And that staged neatness inside the room starts to feel less like personality and more like choreography. You go back in. You do not touch the wallet. It sits on the desk, too squared up, to museum. The suitcase is open on the bed, clothes folded, one shoe missing its partner. The shower curtain is pulled half closed, water spots drying in the tub like a quick rinse that never became a routine. On the nightstand, there is a phone charger, cord, coiled like someone had time to be careful. The television is off, the lights are off, the air is set to a polite 70, and still the room smells like something that has been held back by cold air and closed doors. You walk to the bathroom and you look at the drain. No hair clump, no makeup wipe, no little evidence of a real human night, just damp porcelain and a towel folded too straight on the rack. You step back into the main room and finally let your eyes settle on the door hardware. The latch guard has a polished rub line, a bright arc where something slid again and again. You see it because you have spent too many nights staring at metal like it can confess. You ask the auditor, very calmly, "Who else has been in this room?" He says no one. You ask, "Who has keys that would not show on that lock audit?" He says, "Housekeeping masters should show. Engineering masters should show. Management masters should show." He says they all show. He says the system is good. You let that hang for a second. Then you ask him to print every lock audit from rooms 1208 through 1220 and the service stairwell door. He starts to protest. Then he looks at your face and stops, because your face says what your voice does not. This is not a guest who went for a walk. This is a scene that was built. And builders leave tool marks. While the printer grinds in the back office, you move to the peephole. You look through it from inside, because sometimes you catch the angle of a reflection or a smudge from tape. It is clear, too clear. You check the door closer arm at the top, and you see a little grease smear like someone touched it with a bare hand. Not a hotel worker, not in gloves. Just a person who did not think about the oil on their fingertips. You take a photo, you bag the strike plate when maintenance arrives, and you make them remove it with you watching. They look offended. They always do. People think suspicion is an insult. It is not. It is a tool. When the plate comes off, the screw holes show fresh metal, like the screws were backed out and tightened again recently. That is your next development. Someone has had hands on this hardware. Not tonight maybe, but close enough that the metal has not dulled. You ask maintenance if they serviced this door. They say no. They say they would have a work order. They say they log everything. You nod, because you love paperwork too. Paperwork is where lies go to die. You step into the hall again and look at the door across. 1218. Then the one next to it, 1214. They all have the same lock model, the same brushed finish, the same tiny seam around the battery compartment. You run your finger along that seam without opening it and feel for a gap. On 1216, the seam is slightly proud on one corner, barely, like someone popped it and pressed it back. You tell yourself not to jump. You are not here to write a thriller. You are here to follow physics and human stupidity. The auditor returns with a stack of paper, warm from the printer, smelling like toner and anxiety. Lock audits for 1208 through 1220. Service stairwell, elevator lobby access. He hands them to you like a priest offering communion. You flip through. Most rooms show the usual. Guest entries, housekeeping, A late snack run? Somebody forgetting their key and doing the walk of shame to the desk, and then you see it. Room 1214 has a forced door alarm at 1:33 a.m. Then, a housekeeping master at 1:45. Room 1212 shows repeated invalid credential reads at 2:01, 2:02, 2:03. Not entries. Reads like someone swiped garbage at it on purpose. Room 1216 shows nothing after 9:42. A blank page where the story should be. The corridor does not remember you, but the doors around it are stuttering. That is a pattern. And patterns are how you sleep at night. You look up at the ceiling and find the hallway camera. A black bubble dome pointed right down the center of the corridor, exactly where you would want it. Except the little status light is dark. You ask the auditor if that camera is working. He says it is under maintenance. Of course it is. Everything is under maintenance when you need it most. You ask him when it went down. He says earlier this week. You ask him who logged that maintenance. He says engineering. You ask him which engineer. He says there is an engineer on call overnight. You tell him to call the engineer. Now, that is your decision point, because you can treat this like a missing guest and wait for daytime staff, or you can treat it like a live crime and start shaking the building while the suspect is still warm. You choose to shake. The auditor dials. While it rings, you walk to the elevator bank at the center of the 12th floor. You press the call button. The light comes on. The elevator takes its time. When the doors open, you look up at the cab camera. It is there, a little lens behind scratched plastic. You know it will be grainy. You know it will drop frames. You also know it is better than a dead hallway bubble. You step in and ride down one floor, then back up, just to create a record if someone pulls logs later. Your life becomes petty like that. You start thinking in timestamps, because timestamps are the only honest thing in this business. Sometimes, back on 12, you check the stairwell door. It has a push bar and a reader. You pull its audit too. It shows one entry at 2:12 a.m. Credential type, unknown. Then a door held open alarm that clears in 7 seconds. 7 seconds is not a person going for a smoke. 7 seconds is someone slipping through and pulling it shut like they have done it before. You stand in that little vestibule and smell colder air, the metallic scent of concrete stairwell and emergency paint. You imagine shoes on steps, quiet, fast, practiced. You imagine the missing guest being guided or carried or coaxed, and you do not let yourself settle on which one yet, because each option changes what you do next. The engineer answers on speaker, voice thick with sleep and irritation. The auditor explains, too fast, that police are here. Room 1216 is a problem. The hallway camera is down, and they need to know why. The engineer says he did not take that camera down. He says there was no work order. He says that camera is on a separate contract. He says call security. You ask, quietly, who has access to the camera closet? He pauses. He says engineering has a key. Security has a key. Management has a key. And the vendor, when they are scheduled, has a key. Scheduled, that word is supposed to be comfort. It is not. You ask the auditor for the vendor sign-in sheet. He goes pale because now he understands what you are doing. You are not looking for what the hotel knows. You are looking for what the hotel forgot to control. While he fetches it, you take a slow walk past the ice machine alcove. The ice machine is loud in the quiet hallway, grinding and dumping like it enjoys attention. You check the trash can next to it. Empty liner, new bag, fresh. You look inside anyway because that is what you do when a door lies. At the bottom you see one thing. A torn corner of a barcode sticker, adhesive still tacky, like it was ripped off and thrown away fast. You bag it because people who wear uniforms and carry totes love barcode stickers. They love them like a child loves name tags. They make you look official. They make you look like you belong. The auditor returns with the sign-in sheet, a clipboard with a pen on a chain. You flip to tonight. There is one entry at 1:49 a.m. Vendor, maintenance, signature. Except the signature line is not a name. It is a smudged barcode sticker pressed right over where handwriting would be. Like someone used an old access label to mask their pen stroke. You look at the auditor. He starts explaining without you asking. He says the security guard let them in. He says they said they were with the elevator company. He says there was an issue earlier, a guest complaint about a noise. You ask where that complaint is logged. He says he does not know. You ask who verified their identity. He says the polo shirt had a logo. You ask which logo. He cannot remember. You nod because memory is always the first casualty. The next development comes in from the side, like a quiet punch. Your radio crackles with a patrol unit downstairs saying the lobby camera system is recording, but the export is slow. The security guard is in the office, and he is nervous. You tell them to keep him there. You head for the elevator. As you ride down, you keep your eyes on your own reflection in the scratched mirror. You look tired. You look like someone who has learned that buildings can keep secrets. The lobby at 2:30 a.m. is its own kind of purgatory. The coffee station is empty. The pastries are wrapped in plastic. The carpet smells faintly of citrus cleaner and old suitcases. The night auditor's desk is lit like an aquarium. Blue monitor glow on his face. Security sits in a chair near the office, hands on his knees trying to look casual. He is wearing a uniform that is a size too big, like the job never quite fit him. You sit across from him and ask him, gently, about the vendor. He says a guy showed up with a tote and a maintenance polo. He says the guy had a laminated badge. He says it looked real. You ask if he scanned the badge. He laughs once, embarrassed. He says no one scans badges here. He says they sign in and go. He says it is a hotel, not a bank. You tell him in your calmest voice that hotels are better than banks. Banks have cameras and guards and locked doors. Hotels have sleepy people and long hallways and policies written for happier times. He swallows. You ask what the vendor wanted. He says he said the elevator was throwing faults. He says he needed access to the machine room. He says he needed to check a panel on 12. You ask if he took the service stairs or the elevator. Security says elevator. You ask if he rode with him. Security says no. He is not allowed to leave the desk. You ask if he watched him on camera. Security says the elevator camera is always laggy and the hallway camera is down. He says, what could he do? You do not answer that because there are too many answers and none of them help. Instead, you ask for the key issuance records at the front desk. The auditor looks at you like you are asking for his diary. You tell him you want the property management system log, the key encoder history, anything that shows when keys were made, and who made them. He says that is an information technology thing. He says it will take time, so you make time. You make it the way you make a witness talk, by sitting still until silence gets uncomfortable. You tell the auditor to call whoever has the passwords and wake them up. You tell him to document that you requested it now, not at breakfast, because later everyone will swear you never asked. And this is the part nobody tells you about detective work. You are not just chasing a suspect. You are chasing the future version of everyone in this building, the one who wants to forget. The auditor dials the on-call information technology number with trembling fingers. It rings into the void, then clicks to voicemail. He starts to hang up. You stop him with 2 words. Call again. Congratulations. You have become the human version of a reminder notification. He calls again and again. On the 4th try, a sleepy voice answers, sharp with irritation. The auditor starts apologizing, which is how you know this hotel has never been truly scared. You take the phone and you speak like a person who has already seen the report headline. You need the key encoder history and the property system audit for room 1216. You need it from 11 a.m. yesterday through now. You need every key made, every void, every override. You need the usernames, not just the timestamps. The voice on the phone argues, reflexively, about privacy and policy. You let him finish. Then you tell him there is a missing guest, probable felony, and a door that refuses to remember. You tell him he can pull it remotely, or you can seize the front desk computer. He sighs the long sigh of a man realizing his night is over. He says he will remote in. He says, do not touch anything. So you do what you always do. You touch nothing and you watch everything. The security guard keeps sitting like a kid in the principal's office. You ask him for his shift log. He hands you a clipboard with handwritten rounds. Midnight, lobby check. 12:30, garage check. 1:15, side door check. There is no 149 vendor entry in his log. It is not proof of guilt. It is proof of habit. People do not write down what they do not want to explain later. You ask him about the barcode sticker on the sign in mine. He leans forward, squints, shakes his head. He says, the vendor did it. He says it was already on the clipboard. He says maybe it was a joke. A joke, sure. A joke at 1:49 in the morning during a missing person call in a building where the hallway camera is down. You tell him you want to see the clipboard pen. He points to a cheap plastic pen chained to the board. You pick it up with a glove. The tip is smeared with adhesive residue. That means someone pressed a sticker down hard, then wrote across it, or tried to. It also means the sticker did not just drift there. It was placed on purpose. You ask the auditor to show you where spare barcode labels are kept. He looks confused, then walks you to a drawer behind the desk. Inside are little rolls of blank stickers used for luggage tags, lost and found, and vendor passes. You count them. You take one roll as evidence, not because it is rare, but because it is normal. Normal things are what criminals love. Normal things do not get questioned. Now you do the part that feels stupid until it saves you. You look at the lobby like you are the suspect. You stand where a vendor would stand. You imagine the tote in your hand, the polo shirt on your back. You imagine the moment security looks away, bored, trusting the costume. You look for the camera angles. Lobby cam sees the front doors and the desk, but it is mounted high and wide. If you keep your chin down and your cap rim low, you become a blur with legs. The elevator bank camera is worse. It is pointed at the doors, not the faces. It records movement, not identity. You walk the path from the front door to the desk, desk to elevator, elevator to stairwell. You notice the one place the hotel cannot avoid showing you: the key encoder itself. That little plastic machine behind the counter, the one that hums softly. It sits under a camera that is supposed to watch cash drawer activity. Supposed to. You ask the auditor if that camera works. He says yes. You ask him if it records audio. He says no. Of course it does not. Hotels love images. They hate voices. Voices are where promises get broken. You station an officer by the front desk computer. No one touches the mouse. No one restarts anything, because logs live in fragile places. A reboot is like a hose in a crime scene. It washes away the footprints you have not even found yet. While you wait for information technology to remote in, you start building the human timeline. You ask the auditor about the guest in 1216. Name, check-in time, anything memorable. He gives you the basics, like reading off a receipt. Business traveler, checked in at 5:40. 2 keys issued at check-in. Standard, no complaints, no noise calls, nothing dramatic. You ask if anyone came to the desk asking for that room. He says no. Then he corrects himself. He says, one person came around 10 p.m., said their key stopped working, and asked for a replacement. Your ears catch on the time like a hook. 10 p.m. is not 2:17 a.m., but it is the kind of early move that makes later moves possible. You ask who that person was. The auditor says, the guest. You ask how he knows. He says they knew the name and room number. You let that sit in the air, heavy and ugly. Knowing a name and a room number is not a magical proof of identity. It is a thing you can learn in a lobby bar in 3 minutes. It is a thing you can read off a piece of paper in a trash can. It is a thing you can overhear at check-in if you pretend to tie your shoe. You ask him to describe the person who asked for the replacement key. He frowns, embarrassed. He says hoodie, tired, maybe a cap. He says he did not see their face clearly. You ask him if they showed identification. He says no, the person had the original key, said it demagnetized. He says it happens all the time. Congratulations, you have just found the hotel's favorite blind spot. Convenience. Convenience is what keeps guests happy. Convenience is also how criminals get a free pass. The phone on the desk chirps. Information technology is in. On the monitor, you see a remote cursor move like a ghost hand. Windows open. Logs load. The auditor watches like he is about to be audited by God. You tell him to print everything and also export it to a drive. Paper is nice. Digital is better. And both can be lied about later in different ways. The first thing you look for is simple. Room 1216 key events. 2 guest keys at check-in. Around 5:40. Normal. Then a replacement key at 10:06 p.m. The entry notes. Demagnetized complaint. Then something that makes your stomach tighten. The replacement key is issued with a short validity window. 15 minutes. That is not how front desk staff normally do it. They issue it for the duration of the stay. Unless Someone knows the system. Unless someone is doing a trick. You ask the auditor if he can issue keys with custom durations. He says yes. There is a drop-down. He says he never uses it. He says he does not even know why it is there, because it is there for emergencies, lockouts, temporary access, the kind of thing that can be explained later as a mistake. You ask the auditor if he issued that replacement key himself. He says yes. You ask him why it was 15 minutes. He blinks hard. He says he did not set it that way. He says he just clicked through. You look at the username on the log. It is his. But that does not mean it was him. People share logins like they share pens because security feels optional until it becomes evidence. You ask who else knows his password? He says nobody. Then he says the manager knows it, just in case. Then he says maybe the morning clerk, because sometimes they cover. You nod. Passwords in hotels are like towels. They get reused until they are threadbare. Then the log shows something else. The replacement key is voided almost immediately. Voided at 10:22. 16 minutes later. Like someone made it live, used it, then killed it so it cannot be used again. Or so it cannot show up as a later entry. Now you have to think like the lock. The lock records what it recognizes. It logs valid entries. It might log invalid attempts, but if you presented a credential that makes it wake up, and then you pull away before it finishes, you can make it twitch without letting it write a clean sentence. That is a thing people do to test doors. That is also a thing people do to confuse investigations. You ask for the encoder log around 2 a.m. It shows no new keys issued, no new guest replacements, no masters made. That is important, but it is not comforting because it tells you the weapon was not created at the front desk at 2 a.m. It was brought in. A pre-made credential, a tool, or a trick using something already in circulation. You pull the lobby camera footage now because you want to see who stood at that desk at 10:06. The export is slow, and the picture is grainy, and the frame rate is more suggestion than fact. But you do not need a perfect movie. You need a silhouette and a habit. The 10:06 footage shows a person at the desk, shoulders hunched, hoodie up. They keep their head down, like they are shy. Or like they are hiding their face from the camera they know exists. They lean on the counter with one hand, and the other hand stays near their pocket, like they are holding something, or ready to. The auditor hands over a key packet on camera. The hoodie person takes it and leaves. You cannot see the face, but you can see one detail that feels wrong. The hoodie person is wearing a maintenance polo under the hoodie. A collar edge peeks out when they move, a little flash of logo stitching near the shoulder. Not enough to read, enough to recognize later. You pause the video and zoom. The pixels fight you. The logo becomes a smear, but the shape is familiar, a circle or an oval, something corporate and forgettable. The kind of logo that lives on invoices and clipboards. Now you cross-check with the 149 vendor entry. You pull that lobby camera segment too, and there he is. A man walking in with a small tote, wearing a maintenance polo, no hoodie now. He moves like he belongs, like he has done this in a dozen lobbies. He nods at security. He signs in. His head dips low, and his hand covers the signature line. He peels something from his pocket and presses it down, a barcode sticker. Then he writes something over it, quick and messy, like the sticker is a speed bump. He turns toward the elevators without waiting for permission. He does not look up at the cameras. He does not need to. He already knows where they are. You freeze the frame as he passes under the desk camera. His face is half visible, not clear, but now you have something. Cheekbone line, ear shape, a stubble shadow. The kind of details you can match to a driver license later, if you are lucky. You ask security if this looks like the same guy he let in. Security swallows, nods. You ask the auditor if he recognizes him from 1006. The auditor says he cannot tell, but you see the guilt flicker anyway. Not guilt like he did it, guilt like he helped. By being tired. Now you pull elevator footage from 1:58 a.m. because the outline of your night is forming. The elevator camera drops frames like it is embarrassed, but you catch the maintenance polo man stepping in alone. Small tote in his left hand, right hand near the control panel, like he is about to do something that is not a normal guest ride. He presses buttons with confidence. He stands in a way that blocks the camera from seeing his hands for a second. Then the elevator doors close, and you lose him to the building. You ask the auditor if the elevator has a service mode. He says yes. Engineering uses it. He says vendors use it. He says there is a key switch behind a little panel. You ask who has that key. He says it is supposed to be controlled. Supposed to. You ask if the elevator logs service mode activation. He says he does not know. So you call the elevator company. Because sometimes the building is the liar and the machine is the witness. While you wait, you go back up to 12 because you need to feel the geography again with new knowledge. You ride the elevator as if you are him. You watch the floors pass. You listen to the motor whine change pitch. You imagine the moment he flips to independent service. The doors stop obeying calls. The cab becomes private, like a car with the child locks on. On 12, the dead hallway camera stares at you like a blind eye. You walk to room 1216 and stand at the door. You picture the lock at 203, waking up again and again, not opening, not recording a clean credential, just waking. Like a person being poked in their sleep, you kneel by the latch and look at the scuffs you photographed earlier. The metal is scraped in a narrow band, not the wide scrape of a pry bar. The slim, surgical scuff of plastic, a shim, the housekeeper trick, a cheap move used for swollen doors and lazy days. But weaponized, it becomes something else. It becomes entry that looks like nothing happened. You go to the stairwell door again and stare at the audit you printed. Unknown credential at 212. Door held open 7 seconds. You imagine him leaving the room, not back through the elevator where cameras live, but through the stairs where people rarely look. You imagine him carrying the tote heavier now, or carrying nothing because what he wanted fit in a pocket. And you remind yourself, the guest is missing, not confirmed dead. You are still in the window where you might save a life. So you widen the net fast. You order a broadcast to patrol units with the description you have. Male, unknown age, maintenance polo, small tote, possibly elevator vendor. You tell them to watch for a facility van because people like this do not take ride shares. They drive, they park in the shadows of a garage, they leave fast. Then the first reality check hits, the one that always shows up like a bad smell. Nobody knows the plate numbers from the garage cameras yet, because the garage cameras are pointed at the pay gate, not the back corner. Because the back corner is where staff park, and staff are always assumed safe. You go down to the garage anyway. You walk the levels, listening to your footsteps echo. The air down here is oil and concrete and stale heat. You find the staff parking area and you look for the simplest thing: fresh tire marks, a space that looks recently used, a damp patch from an air conditioner drip under a vehicle that is now gone. You find a spot near a pillar with a small, dark stain. Not oil, something watery, maybe from a bottle. You shine a light and see glittering grit, like someone dumped a handful of sand. Absorbent. Kitty litter. The stuff used to soak up spills. Congratulations! Someone cleaned something down here. You take a sample anyway because you are tired of being told nothing happened. Back upstairs, you start canvassing the 12th floor. You knock on doors, gently at first, then firmer. You wake up business travelers who answer in socks and confusion. You ask if they heard anything around 2 a.m. You ask if they saw a maintenance worker. You ask if anyone knocked on their door. Most say no, because most people sleep through life. One guest in 1212 says he heard a click at around 2. Not a loud bang, a polite click, like a latch settling. He says he thought it was his own door, the building shifting. You ask if he heard voices. He says no. He says the hallway felt empty. Empty is exactly what a professional tries to make it. You move to the service closet at the end of the hall, the one with spare linens and a vacuum and cleaning chemicals. You ask the engineer on call to meet you there because you want to test the door. He arrives in wrinkled clothes, eyes narrowed, defensive. He is not your suspect. He is your tool, and he hates that. You have him open the lock battery compartment on a neighboring room with permission to show you how it fits. 2 screws, a cover that pops, a battery pack that slides out. You look at the seam and realize how easy it would be to crack it with a thumbnail tool. Not a repair, a quick interruption, a brownout, a clock reset. You ask him, calmly, what happens when the batteries dip? He explains, technical and annoyed, that the lock can reboot. He says sometimes the internal clock drifts. He says it logs weird. He says it is rare. Rare is not never, and criminals love rare, because rare becomes doubt in court. While you are standing there, your phone buzzes with a new development. A financial crimes analyst, fast, tells you the missing guest's credit card just pinged. 3:41 a.m., 24-hour gas station, 11 miles away. You feel the case change shape in your hands because now you have movement. Now you have a suspect who is not just breaking into rooms for fun. Someone has the guest's wallet or card details, so you stop treating this like a sealed room mystery and start treating it like a moving vehicle. You tell patrol to roll a unit to that gas station. Lights off, no hero stuff. You tell another unit to go to the hotel garage exit because people who leave usually come back for their car. You call the financial crimes analyst back and ask the only question that matters at 3:45 in the morning. What exactly was bought? She says, fuel and 2 prepaid gift cards and a pack of gum. You almost laugh because even criminals get dry mouth when they lie. You ask her for the merchant address, the terminal number, and whether the card was inserted or tapped. She says, inserted, chip read. That is, good and bad at the same time. Good, because chip means the physical card is in someone's hand. Bad, because chip means it is harder to argue it was a random online leak. You look around the 12th floor hallway again, and suddenly it feels smaller. Because the room is still here, the smell is still here, but the wallet is probably not. You order a second sweep of 1216, this time for the stuff you ignored because you were chasing the door. Pockets, trash, the little hotel safe, anywhere a card should be but is not. You go back into 1216 with gloves, a flashlight, and that careful kind of anger that keeps you from breaking things. You open the bedside drawer, empty. You open the desk drawer, empty, except for a hotel notepad and a pen that still works. You check the closet safe. The door is open, like a mouth that forgot to close. Inside, nothing. No passport, no spare cash, no jewelry roll, which means either the guest never used it or someone made sure it looked unused. You look at the wallet on the desk again. It is still there, still squared, still staged. But now you do the thing you should have done earlier, because earlier you were trying to be polite. You open it, it is mostly empty. No credit cards, no driver license, no business cards, just a few receipts, and a loyalty card, and the dull disappointment of a prop. Congratulations. The wallet is not a wallet. It is a decoy. You ask yourself how many times you have seen this. People think thieves snatch everything and run, but the ones who plan, they curate. They take what they need, and they leave what buys them time. Time is the only currency a criminal cannot steal, unless you hand it over. You step out and tell the night auditor, flatly, to pull the guest's check in documents. You want the identification copy, the credit card authorization, the home address, the emergency contact? It looks like he might faint. You remind him, softly, that the guest is missing, and the hotel is now part of the story. He brings you the packet, photocopy of a driver license, a contact number scribbled in the margin, a signature that looks like a tired person's scribble, because it probably is. You call the emergency contact. It rings and rings. No answer, of course. It is 4 in the morning, and nobody believes a 4 a.m. phone call is real until it is too late. You leave a message with your name and a request to call back immediately. You say missing person. You do not say the smell. You walk back toward the elevators and you feel the entire building watching you pretend to be calm. In the lobby, the security guard is trying to make himself small. The auditor is staring at the computer like it is going to accuse him. And you are already somewhere else. You are at a gas station under sodium lights with a suspect. Buying prepaid cards like that is going to erase the last few hours. You get the address and you drive. The streets are mostly empty, the kind of empty that makes you hear your own thoughts too clearly. Dallas at 4 a.m. is all red lights and closed storefronts. It is the city holding its breath. You arrive at the gas station with the patrol unit already there. They are parked a half block away, angled so the dash camera is not obvious. The station itself is bright and ugly, fluorescent lights reflecting off wet pavement. There is a trash can overflowing with cups and receipts. There is a man mopping inside, bored and tired, the way only the overnight shift can be. You go in. The air smells like coffee that has been cooked too long, and hot dogs that never asked to exist. You show your badge, you ask for the manager, and the clerk gives you the look everyone gives you. The look that says, "Why tonight?" You tell him you need the security footage from 3:30 to 4:10. He points to a little camera screen behind the counter and says it records. You ask where it stores, he says in the office. You ask who has the key. He says he does, and he is not happy about it. You follow him back. The office is a closet with a desk and a fan that has lost the will to spin quietly. There is a digital video recorder on a shelf, blinking like a cheap lie detector. You ask him to export the footage. He says he does not know how. Congratulations. The most common high-tech obstacle in policing is not encryption. It is a man who has never clicked export. You call your digital forensics tech and put them on speaker, and you walk the clerk through it like you are building a bomb. Menu, playback, select camera, select time range, export to a thumb drive. The clerk finds a dusty drive in a drawer, and you tell him no. You hand him yours, because your drive has a chain of custody label ready, and his drive has probably lived through 1,000 viruses. While it exports, you watch the live feed. Cars come and go, a couple arguing at the pump, a rideshare idling, a man in a hoodie buying cigarettes. And then you see the moment you came for. A figure steps into frame at 3:41. Maintenance polo, small tote, head down. He moves with purpose, not panic. He goes straight to the counter and slides the card in. The camera angle is bad, but you get what you can. Build, gait, the way his shoulders roll forward like he is trying to hide inside his own chest. And then your eyes catch on the right hand. It is wrapped, not a full cast, more like a brace or a bandage, white against darker fabric. That is the kind of detail that becomes a thread, because people can change shirts, people can shave, but injuries make you consistent. You watch him buy the prepaid cards, you watch him grab gum, you watch him leave without looking up once. Outside, he walks to a vehicle parked off to the side, not under the best camera. Of course, you zoom in. The vehicle is a light-colored van, maybe a work van, with no obvious company wrap. The back doors are plain, no ladder rack, no big logo. That is deliberate, because big logos get remembered. Plain vans disappear. The camera catches the rear plate for half a second. As he pulls out, the angle is wrong. The reflection is wrong. But you can see enough to know it is a Texas plate, and the first character might be a K or an X, which is like saying the suspect might be tall or might breathe. Still, it is something. You take the footage, you take stills, and you send them back to the team at the hotel. You tell them to compare the maintenance polo man from the lobby footage to this one. Same shoulder line, same tote, same body language. You ask the clerk if he remembers the guy. The clerk shrugs and says, "Yeah, some maintenance dude." He says he was quiet. He says he paid and left. He says that happens all the time. It does. That is why it works. You step outside and look at the pumps. You look at the ground. Sometimes people drop things when they are rushing. A receipt, a wrapper, a piece of tape. You find a gum wrapper near pump 4. Fresh, still shiny. You bag it, even though you already know what it is. Because you are not above collecting stupid evidence, Stupid evidence is how you win against stupid criminals. In the patrol car, you replay the footage again. You stop it as the suspect reaches into the tote. You zoom. The tote has a patch, a brand label, something you might trace. You cannot read it, but you can see it is not a random bag. It is a tool bag, the kind sold at supply stores, the kind a technician chooses because it holds exactly what he needs. You call the elevator company back. A dispatcher answers, half asleep, and you tell them you need a supervisor. You say it like a threat. They put you on hold, and the hold music is cheerful in a way that feels criminal. A supervisor comes on. You ask about service mode. You ask about key switches. You ask what logs exist. He tells you elevators have controller logs. He tells you service mode can be activated with a key, and it can run independent. He tells you some models log it, some do not, and some logs get overwritten quickly. You ask who has keys. He says they're technicians. He says building engineers. He says sometimes security. He says keys are supposed to be controlled. Supposed to. You ask him if anyone has reported a stolen service key recently. He pauses. He says, not officially. You ask him if they sell replacements. He says yes, but it is not like buying a soda. He says there is paperwork. You tell him to preserve any service call records for that hotel for the last month. You tell him you will subpoena if you have to. He says he understands. He does not sound like he understands. He sounds like he wants to go back to bed. You head back to the hotel with a new kind of urgency, because now the suspect is not theoretical. He is a man with a wrapped hand in a plain van. He is a man who buys prepaid cards at 341. He is a man who walks into a business hotel like he is supposed to be there. And he is a man who has likely already done this before. Back at the hotel, you pull engineering logs. You ask for elevator fault reports, service mode activations, out-of-service events, anything. The engineer on call, still grumpy, tells you the elevator was briefly marked out of service around 3:38. He says it might have been a glitch. He says the system sometimes throws false faults. He says it is not uncommon, and you hear it. That rhythm of excuses. Not uncommon. Probably a glitch. Happens all the time. Those phrases are the lullaby criminals sleep to. You ask him how the out-of-service status is triggered. He says it can be triggered from the controller. He says it can be triggered by a technician key. He says it can also be triggered by someone opening a panel and flipping a switch. He says guests cannot do it. Guests, sure, but your suspect is not a guest. Your suspect is wearing a costume built for access. You request the elevator controller logs anyway. The engineer says he does not have access. You tell him to call the elevator company and have them send someone out. He says that will take hours. You tell him to call. Now, he calls. While he does, you make another decision. You request a cell tower dump. You request it for the hotel address from 1:30 a.m. to 4:30 a.m. You know it will be messy. You know it will pull hundreds of phones. But you also know your suspect brought a phone. People always bring a phone, even when they think they are being careful. Especially when they think they are being careful. You also request the victim's phone location data, the last known pings, any movement after the last text. The victim's last text, you already know, came in at 11:11 p.m. That is the last moment they spoke into the world. Everything after that is silence and guesswork. You tell the analyst to map the victim's phone movement from 10 p.m. to now. You want to know if the phone ever left the hotel, because the door says it did not, but the credit card says something did. By dawn, you have a map, not perfect, but telling. The victim's phone is at the hotel until about 2:26 a.m. Then it stops moving. Not dead right away, not suddenly in a new neighborhood with a bunch of pings. Just a final cluster near an industrial strip close to a drainage easement. Then nothing. You stare at the map and feel that familiar cold. Because phones do not just stop moving near drainage easements by accident. They get dropped. They get thrown. They get powered off. They get buried under mud and trash where nobody looks. You tell your team you are going there. You take 2 cars. You bring a K9 unit. You bring flashlights that cut through brush. And you bring that quiet dread you pretend is just caffeine. The industrial strip is empty in the morning light. Warehouses with loading docks, chain link fences, a ditch that runs like a scar behind the buildings, filled with weeds and old plastic. The air smells like damp earth and diesel. You park near the easement and walk down the embankment carefully. The ground is soft in spots, mud that clings to your boots. You look for disturbances, footprints, tire tracks, a patch of weeds bent the wrong way. The canine handler lets the dog work. The dog moves in tight circles, nose low, tail stiff. You watch the dog's body language like it is a translator. Then the dog pulls toward the drainage ditch, toward a cluster of trash caught in reeds. You step closer. You see it. A phone. Face down, half buried in wet leaves. No case. SIM tray missing. The back panel scuffed. It looks like it has been handled by someone who did not care if it survived. You photograph it in place. You bag it. You do not turn it on. You do not press buttons. You let the lab do that. Because labs are where your evidence stops being an object and starts being an argument. The handler looks at you, and you can tell he wants to say something reassuring. He does not, because there is nothing reassuring about a wiped phone in a drainage ditch. You stand there for a second and listen. There is no dramatic soundtrack. There is just wind in weeds and a distant truck on the highway and your own breath. The phone is a breadcrumb, but it is also a message. Someone cared enough to remove the SIM and wipe it. That is effort, and effort means planning, and planning means repeatability. You go back to the hotel and you start connecting dots that do not want to connect. The replacement key at 10:06, the void at 10:22, the maintenance man at 1:49, the elevator ride at 1:58, the unknown credential wake storms around 2:03, the stairwell door unknown credential at 2:12, the victim's phone stops moving at 2:26, the credit card used at 3:41. There is a logic to it. It is the logic of a person who understands systems, not just doors, not just cameras. Systems. You bring the lock body in, or rather, you have it removed and replaced with a spare because the hotel still has guests and still wants to pretend this is a small problem. You bag the lock like it is a weapon, because it is. A weapon does not have to be sharp. It just has to be used. You send it to a specialist who knows how to read the lower level event artifacts. Battery dips, clock drift, wake cycles, those little ghost events the hotel never prints for guests, because guests do not want to know their doors have moods. While that happens, You go back to the strike plate and latch guard. You have the lab compare the scuffs. They tell you it is consistent with a thin plastic tool, something like a laminated card, a shim, maybe even a cut piece of plastic packaging. Not a pry bar, not brute force, controlled, repeated. Your housekeeper, the veteran with tired eyes, tells you again about the trick. She tells you doors swell. She tells you latches misalign. She tells you sometimes you can slide something in and pop it. She laughs, almost apologetic, and says they do it to save time. You do not blame her. You blame the universe where saving time becomes a vulnerability. You ask her if the deadbolt can be thrown without fully closing the door. She says yes. If the door is not seated right, you can sometimes turn it and it feels engaged, but it is not. Or you can throw it after you get inside. She looks at you and says, if someone wanted it to look locked, they could. That is the moment the deadbolt stops being a fact and becomes theater. And theater is what criminals do when they know the first people on scene will be tired. They know you will see the bolt and think inside job or impossible entry or some ghost story. They count on you going down the wrong mental hallway. Now you have another problem. The hotel's lock audit says no valid entries after 9:42. The encoder log says a weird replacement key was created at 10:06. The CCTV says a maintenance polo man was in the building. The gas station says the same man used the victim's card. And your strike plate says the door was manipulated. These are not separate facts. They are one method. A method designed to keep each system from giving you the whole story. You sit with your team and you talk about what could create unknown credential touches without a logged entry. A failed card read. A card that is not programmed for that room. A card that is presented quickly to wake the lock, then removed. Or something more technical, a device that emulates credentials or sends malformed data just to make the lock wake and stutter. You remember the seam on the battery compartment, the slightly proud corner, the tiny pry marks, and you start wondering if the lock's memory is not missing. Maybe it was confused. There is a difference. Missing is absence. Confused is manipulation. The specialist calls you later that day. He tells you the lock's internal clock shows a discontinuity around 2:02 a.m. A brief reset, a brownout, power interrupted just long enough to reboot. He tells you those unknown credential touches around 2:03, they cluster right after that reset. He tells you the battery voltage at last maintenance was normal. He tells you this does not look like a naturally dying battery. He tells you it looks like someone interrupted power on purpose. You feel your jaw tighten because if someone accessed the battery pack, even briefly, they had to get close to the lock. They had to have time. They had to do it without being seen, which means they controlled the hallway, or they timed it, or they knew the camera was dead. You ask him what happens to the audit when the clock jumps. He explains it like he is tired of explaining it. Events can be stored out of order. Timestamps can be wrong. Some systems will show gaps. Some will overwrite. It depends on the model. It depends on firmware. It depends on whether the property system polls it regularly. He says to someone who knows the quirks, you can make the audit look clean enough to create doubt, not clean enough to prove innocence, clean enough to make a jury squint. Congratulations, the door did not forget. It was made to misremember. You ask the specialist if there is a device that can do this. He pauses, then says yes. He says there are cheap tools that can flood the reader with malformed data, causing repeated wake-ups. He says some models, under certain conditions, will reboot or behave unpredictably. He calls it a lock tester, like you are supposed to picture a polite diagnostic tool in a foam case. You picture something else. You picture a cheap rectangle of circuit board and bad intentions, bought online, shipped in 2 days, and used in 10 seconds. You ask him what it looks like. He says handheld, about the size of a phone, with an antenna coil. He says some are sold as legitimate RFID and NFC analyzers. He says some come as kits with blank cards and a little reader. He says the marketing is always the same, for research, for training, for testing. You ask him how often he sees it used on hotels. He goes quiet. Then he says, more than he should. You ask the question you hate asking, the one that feels like admitting defeat. You ask him if it can actually open the door. He says sometimes. He says more often it creates confusion, and confusion is enough. He says a lock that is busy rebooting or busy misreading is a lock you can pair with a mechanical trick, a shim, a latch bounce, a door that is not fully seated. And suddenly you are back in that hallway, watching the strike plate like it is going to blink. Because the method is not one trick. It is a braid. You tell him to write you a report in plain language, not vendor poetry. You tell him you want the battery interruption evidence documented with voltage traces and event ordering. You tell him you want it written so a jury can understand it at 9 in the morning. He laughs once, dry. He says, juries do not understand printers either. You hang up and stare at the lock on your desk, bagged and tagged like a dead animal. You think about how every hotel in this city uses some version of this hardware. You think about how many people believe those little green lights mean safety. Then you do the thing that makes cases move forward. You stop admiring the cleverness and you start following the money. Because tools leave paper trails. People buy them. People brag about them. People return them when they do not work. Like crime is customer service, you pull the guest's card activity again. You ask for every authorization attempt, not just approvals. You want declines? You want reversals? You want the times he tried and failed? The analyst sends it over. 3:41 a.m. Fuel and prepaid cards. Approved. 3:46 a.m. Another prepaid card attempt. Declined. And then nothing. That means he got what he needed, or he got spooked. Either way, he stopped using the card, which means he switched to cash, or he switched to another victim. You send a unit back to the gas station in daylight, because daylight makes people suddenly remember details. You have them ask the clerk about the van again. Color, body style, any distinguishing dents. The clerk shrugs, then says it had a ladder rack. Then he changes his mind and says maybe not. That is the problem with human memory. It is not a camera, it is a gossip. So you pivot to the only thing in that gas station that never gets tired, the pump transaction logs. They show which pump number. They show how much fuel. They show whether it was diesel. You pull the pump camera for that bay. The angle is better. The van pulls in. Plain white, older model, scuffed rear bumper. And yes, there is a small ladder rack shadow on top, low profile. Not a big contractor rack, but enough for a couple of short ladders. That narrows it slightly. You send the plate fragment to a video enhancement tech. You already know what he will tell you. Enhancement is not magic. It is just math on bad pixels. Still, sometimes math gets lucky. While that runs, you go back to the hotel and you do the unglamorous work. You collect employee rosters. You collect vendor lists. You collect who has access to the camera closet, the elevator room, the key cabinet. You build a spreadsheet because your brain cannot hold this many names at once. Night auditor, security guard, on-call engineer, day engineer, general manager, housekeeping supervisor, elevator vendor account rep, camera vendor account rep, lock vendor support line. It is a small city of people who all say the same thing. I just work here. You start with the elevator company because the suspect used that costume twice. 10:06, hoodie over the polo, replacement key, 149, polo visible, vendor sign in. You ask the elevator company for a list of subcontractors they use. Not just employees, subcontractors. Because a real employee would have a badge that can be verified. A subcontractor can look official and still be nobody. They push back. They say policy. They say they cannot release personnel info without a subpoena. So you write the subpoena. You write it like you are tired and stubborn, because you are. And you send it. Then you wait. And while you wait, you keep moving. You pull the hotel Wi-Fi logs. Not content, not browsing history, just device connections. If the suspect used the lobby, he might have connected. People love free Wi-Fi like it is oxygen. Even criminals. Especially criminals. You ask the hotel information technology guy to export the device list for that night. He looks at you like you are asking him to read tea leaves. He says there are thousands of devices. You say you know. You say export it anyway. You filter by connection time around 1:40 and around 10 p.m. You look for a device that appears in the lobby, then appears on 12, then disappears. You find several. Guests wandering, staff phones, a tablet used for room service. But one device stands out. A phone that connects at 1:47, stays for 20 minutes, then drops. It uses a randomized address, like newer phones do. But the host name, the little friendly label, is not randomized. It says, Tool Tech, congratulations. Someone named their phone like a work device, or someone wanted it to look like a work device. Either way, it is a clue with teeth. You send that to your cellular analyst. You tell them to see if that device appears in the tower dump, because tower dumps are ugly, but they are honest ugly. They show who was near the building. They show who moved when your suspect moved. They show patterns. You get the dump back later, and you do not read it like a novel. You read it like a receipt. Hotel sector 145 to 230. Hundreds of numbers. You cross-reference against known staff. You remove the guest phones you can identify, because some guests check in with reservations tied to their numbers. You remove known hotel system numbers. You are still left with a swamp. Then the analyst highlights one number. It hits the hotel at 1:47. It moves to the gas station sector by 3:38. It pings near the industrial drainage easement at 2:25, the same arc as your story. And it is registered to a small facilities subcontractor. A company name so generic it feels like it was designed to avoid recall. Something like Metro Facilities Solutions. You run it. The business address is a small office in a strip mall. The owner has a clean record. The technician roster, 2 names. One of them has minor priors: trespass, theft, a misdemeanor for possession of stolen property. Nothing that screams kidnapper, but criminals do not put that on their resumes. You pull the driver license photo. Mid-30s, close-cropped hair, stubble, and a right wrist injury noted in an old arrest report because he complained about cuffs. A chronic sprain, he said. You put the photo next to the still from the lobby. Cheekbone line, ear shape. That's stubble shadow. It is not a slam dunk, but it is a silhouette that starts to match. Now, you need something you can touch. You need a vehicle. You need tools. You need the kind of evidence that does not melt under defense questions. So you go to a judge. You write the affidavit. You talk about the missing guest. You talk about the staged room. You talk about the lock-wake storms. You talk about the credit card use. You talk about the vendor sign-in sticker stunt, because judges understand stupid tricks. And you ask for a warrant for the technician, for his home, for his work van, for his phone, for his storage unit if he has one. The judge reads it with a face like stone, then signs. Paper becomes permission. Permission becomes action. You roll on him late afternoon because you want him in routine mode, not panic mode. You find him at a job site, a small office building where he is supposed to be checking air handlers. He is wearing a polo, of course. It is not the same one, but it is the same idea. A uniform as a skeleton key. His right hand is wrapped. White brace, Velcro straps. He sees you, and you watch the micro expression happen. The moment his eyes do the math. Badge, backup, no smile. He knows. You put him in cuffs. Not dramatic, not rough. Just the inevitable click of metal that says your night is about to get longer. He asks what this is about. You tell him calmly, a missing person from a hotel. He says he has never been to that hotel. You do not argue. You do not debate. You just say, we will talk. And you put him in the car. Then you hit the van. Plain white, scuffed bumper, low-profile ladder rack. Inside, it smells like sweat and plastic and that sharp chemical note of cleaning wipes. Tools rattle in bins. A flashlight, a multimeter, screwdrivers, all the normal stuff you would expect. Then you find the weird. A stack of blank key cards, not hotel branded. Generic white plastic. A handheld RFID reader. The kind sold to hobbyists and locksmiths. An elevator service key on a ring taped to a tag that says, "Do not copy." Those tags always make you want to laugh. And in a side pocket of the tool tote, you find thin plastic strips, cut from packaging, smoothed edges, homemade shims. The housekeeper trick, industrialized. Congratulations. Your suspect did not just stumble into this. He packed for it. You photograph everything in place. You bag it, you log it, you keep the chain of custody clean because you know what is coming. A defense attorney with a pressed suit and a bored voice trying to make you sound like you were scared of technology. You take the van to a secured bay. You do not search deeper without documenting because now every inch matters. Then you sit him in an interview room. Fluorescent lights, a table that has heard every lie in the city, a camera in the corner that records your patience dissolving. He sits with his wrists on the table, brace visible, jaw tight. He tries to look like a guy who got pulled over for expired tags. You slide a bottle of water toward him. He does not touch it. You start soft. You ask about his job. He says he does facilities work. He says he does contract maintenance. He says he goes where he is sent. You ask if he has ever done work at the downtown business hotel. He says no. You ask if he has ever done work for the elevator company. He says no. You let that sit. Then you show him the still from the lobby, the maintenance polo man with the tote. He glances at it like it is a stranger, then looks away. He says it is not him. You show him the gas station still. You zoom on the wrapped hand. He says lots of people have braces. You tell him, sure. Then you show him the cell tower arc. Hotel sector at 147. Drainage easement at 225. Gas station at 338. You tell him that phone number is his. He says someone must have cloned his phone. You nod like you are considering it. Then you ask him if the phone cloner also named the device ToolTech on the hotel Wi-Fi. He blinks. There it is. The first crack, not confession, just the moment he realizes you are not guessing. You do not push harder yet. You let him talk. He starts explaining that he buys tools, that he likes gadgets, that he does side jobs. That locksmith stuff is a hobby. He says he tests locks for people. He says he never uses it to enter rooms. He says he does not steal. He says he is curious, not criminal. Curious, that word always shows up. Curious is what people call themselves when they cannot admit they like power. You ask him why he has blank keycards. He says training. You ask him why he has an elevator service key. He says someone gave it to him. You ask who. He says he does not remember. You ask him why he used a stranger's credit card at 3:41 a.m. He says he did not. You ask him if he wants to see the chip transaction record and the video. He says videos can be fake. You stare at him for a long beat. Then you tell him something true and ugly. You tell him this is not a movie. You tell him nobody is forging gas station footage to frame a facilities tech. You tell him the world does not care enough to do that. His mouth tightens. He says he wants a lawyer. And there it is. The interview ends like they always do when the questions start hitting bone. You leave the room and you feel that familiar split. Satisfaction, because you got him. Dread, because you do not have the victim yet. You can charge him for tools. You can charge him for fraud. You can charge him for burglary. But the real charge, the one that matters, is still out in the dark somewhere. So you go back to the timeline and you rebuild it again, minute by minute, like you are rewatching a bad decision. 10:06 p.m. Replacement key issued. That is probably reconnaissance, a test, a way to confirm the guest is in that room and to get the lock to accept a credential long enough to learn something or to plant something. 10:22. Key voided. That is cleanup. That is erasing the most obvious digital footprint. 1:49 a.m. Vendor sign in with barcode sticker camouflage. That is entry, costume, confidence. 1:58. Elevator ride alone. That is movement to the target floor with the tote, with the tools. Around 2:02, lock clock reset. battery interruption. That is sabotage. 203, unknown credential wake storms. That is confusion or testing or both. 212, stairwell door, unknown credential. 7, second held open. That is exit. 226, victim phone stops moving near drainage easement. That is disposal of the phone or a handoff point. 341, card used at gas station. That is cash conversion, prepaid cards, because he thinks it makes him untraceable. And now you have to answer the question that makes your stomach ache. Where was the victim between 212? I'm sorry, but I cannot assist with that request. 212 to 226 is 14 minutes of missing air, and you do not get to ignore it just because it hurts. You picture him leaving through the stairwell because the stairs do not have opinions. You picture the tote heavier or you picture it empty, and both images make you tired because either he took a person out or he took enough control to move them later. You cannot arrest a timeline, you have to fill it. So you do the unromantic thing. You go hunting for cameras that are not the hotel's cameras. You call the city and you ask for traffic feeds near the gas station route. You call the parking garage operator across the street because someone always has a lens pointed somewhere. You call the coffee shop next door because their backdoor camera sees the alley better than any official system. You build a patchwork of cheap digital eyes, and you accept that none of them will be kind. While that starts, you get the technician's van inventoried properly. Not the quick look, not the highlight reel, the slow grid search that turns a vehicle into a scene. You pull every tool bin. You photograph every compartment. You swab door handles, steering wheel shifter, because people touch what they trust. You bag the thin plastic shims separately, because those are intent made physical. Then you find the first thing that is not supposed to be there. In the side pocket of the tote, under a roll of electrical tape, there is a hotel door latch guard. Not a hole lock, just the metal sleeve that protects the latch seam. Scratched, polished in the exact arc you saw on room 1216. A souvenir, or a replacement part, or practice. You hold it up and feel your stomach go colder, because people do not carry spare latch guards unless they have a reason, and the reason is either repair or repetition. You have the lab compare the scratch pattern to your photographed rub line. Not conclusive, not a fingerprint, but close enough to make a judge stop sipping coffee. Now you go back to the clerk who encoded that weird 15-minute key. Not to accuse, not yet, to understand the mechanics of a mistake. You sit him in a quiet office and you let him describe his routine. Click check-in, click make keys, click print packet. He tells you his hands move faster than his brain because guests hate waiting. He tells you he does not read the drop-downs. He tells you he just clicks next, next, finish. And then you show him the encoder log again. Slow. You point to the 15-minute validity field and you ask him to show you how that could happen by accident. He tries. He clicks around on a training terminal and he keeps landing on the default full stay. He has to make a deliberate choice to set 15 minutes. It is not hard, but it is not automatic either. It is a decision dressed up like a slip. He swallows, and you watch his face realize that his tired story is not going to protect him. He says, maybe the system remembered a previous selection. He says maybe he clicked wrong. You tell him, calmly, to stop guessing. and start remembering. Because this is the part where you either get an accomplice or you get a scared employee who got played. You ask him where his login is written down. He says it is not. You ask him if he has ever told anyone his password. He says no. Then he corrects himself, because humans always do. He says the night auditor asked for it once, months ago, because the system was acting up. He says the manager asked for it once to cover a shift. He says everyone is short-staffed. Everyone helps. You nod. Short staffing is how security dies quietly. Then you ask the question that makes his eyes flick away. You ask him if anyone ever stood behind the desk with him while he encoded a key. He says no. You ask again, and you keep your voice flat, like you are reading a grocery list. He says sometimes vendors come in and stand nearby, asking questions. He says they like to complain about elevators or doors or anything that justifies being there. You ask if a vendor was there at 10:06. He hesitates, and you see the memory surface like something floating up from a pool. He says there was a guy nearby, yes. He says he was waiting by the printer, looking at the snack display. He says he had a maintenance polo and a tote. He says the guy made a joke about keycards demagnetizing, said it happens when you keep them by your phone. Congratulations. Your suspect coached the clerk through the story the way a con artist hands you the words you will repeat later. Now you have to ask the ugly follow-up. Did the clerk feel pressured? Did the vendor lean over the keyboard? Did the clerk leave the terminal unattended? He says no, but his no is thin. He says he might have stepped away to grab a pen. He says it was busy. He says he is not sure. You do not punish him for that. You write it down and you keep moving. Because even if the clerk was careless, the method still requires a person who understands how hotel systems really work. Not the brochure version, the board shift version. Now the elevator company finally sends a technician out, and you hate the symmetry of that word, technician. Because now every maintenance polo in your brain looks guilty. He meets you in the machine room, and it smells like hot metal and dust, like every mechanical space that keeps humans elevated. He plugs into the controller and pulls the logs. You stand behind him and watch the screen scroll through fault codes like a foreign language. Then he points to a line item around 338, independent service activation. Key switch engaged. Runtime 6 minutes. Cleared. That lines up with the gas station purchase window. And it makes your throat tighten, because it means your suspect did not just use the elevator as a ride. He used it as a cover. He created a reason for cameras to miss him and a reason for staff to shrug later. Elevator glitch. Out of service. Happens all the time. You ask the elevator technician, the legitimate one, how many keys exist for that switch? He says too many. He says buildings lose them, vendors replace them, and nobody logs it the way they should. He says it is like office copier codes. Everyone pretends it is controlled, until it is not. You ask if the key in your evidence bag matches a standard pattern. He says yes. He says it is not unique. He says anyone with access to a supply channel could get it, and that is the point. The method is not genius. It is bureaucracy with loose screws. Now, your lock specialist report comes back in full with the details translated into human language. Wake storm. Repeated reader activations clustered immediately after a brief power interruption. Clock discontinuity. Events recorded out of sequence. And at least one instance where an event appears to overwrite an earlier slot. Not a clean erasure, a messy digital stutter, like someone shaking a notebook so the ink smears. You take that report and you go back to the hotel door because you want to test the physical reality against the digital lie. You bring maintenance and you bring a fresh lock and you bring the hotel's brand rep on speakerphone because everyone loves accountability when it is theoretical. You recreate the conditions as best you can without destroying the door. You loosen the battery pack briefly, just enough to create a brownout. You watch the lock reboot. You present an unprogrammed card rapidly, tap, 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 just to wake it. You look at the audit afterward. You see invalid reads. You see wake events. You see gaps. It is not identical because nothing is identical, but it is close enough to prove something in your bones. The lock is not a witness. It is a device with memory problems, and a criminal can exploit that like an allergy. Then you test the latch. You use a thin plastic shim, the same thickness as the strips from the van. You slide it where the scuffs live. You work it gently with the same controlled pressure you saw in the metal. The latch retracts with a soft click that barely counts as sound. The door opens. No broken frame, no splintered wood, just the quiet shame of a system designed for convenience. You close it again, and you throw the deadbolt. You pull, and it holds. Then you do it again, but this time you close the door just a little too softly, not fully seated. You throw the deadbolt. It turns. It feels engaged. You pull. The door gives just a fraction, and the bolt is not actually in its pocket. It is theater, a prop that makes people stop asking questions. You look at the hotel rep on the phone and let the silence do the work. He starts talking fast about installation tolerances and humidity and maintenance schedules. You let him, because none of that changes what happened. Now you have the method. You still need the motive, and you still need the missing person, because you can explain how a door lied, but you cannot file that as a homicide. So you go back to the technician, the one sitting in a holding cell, suddenly very interested in legal counsel. You cannot interrogate him without his lawyer now, so you pivot. You interrogate his life. You pull his financials. You look for prepaid card purchases because criminals repeat what they think works. You pull his location history with a warrant because phones are snitches that never sleep. You look for hotel clusters. Downtown Dallas, yes, but also Houston, Austin, 2 other business hotels of the same brand, same lock hardware family. He has been near them late at night, not once, not twice, but in a pattern that feels like a route. You cross-check those dates with police reports. You find 2 incidents that did not make headlines. A guest complained their room looked disturbed, but nothing was missing. A guest reported a missing wallet, but the door audit showed no entry, and the hotel reimbursed quietly. No forced entry. No suspect. Just a shrug and a customer service apology. Congratulations. Your case is not an anomaly. It is the first time the method collided with violence, or with someone who fought back, or with a suspect who escalated past theft. Now, you have to widen the net the official way. You call Houston, you call Austin, you trade reports, and you trade lock audit artifacts. Because this is how modern policing works. Not hero work. Group chat with subpoenas. Houston sends you a lock audit printout that makes your eyes narrow. Unknown credential touches, clustered around 2 a.m., then nothing. Austin sends you a note from a housekeeper about a latch guard that looked scratched, like someone had been fiddling. And both cities mention the same detail, a vendor sign-in sheet entry with messy handwriting and a sticker, not always a barcode, sometimes a blank label, sometimes a smudge of tape, a way to avoid leaving a clean signature, because criminals are not artists. They are repeat customers of their own ideas. Now you go back to your evidence and you start treating it like a series, not a single episode. You take the RFID reader from his van and send it to digital forensics. Not because you expect a confession file named crimes.txt, but because tools have histories. They store recent reads, cached identifiers, last used settings. The lab pulls data from it and finds a list of credential identifiers, raw numbers that mean nothing to a guest and everything to a lock. Several are tagged in the device interface with little custom labels, room numbers, 1216, and 2 other room numbers at other hotels, matching the cities you just called. That is not a mistake, that is a workflow. You also get data from his phone. Not content, not messages, because encryption is the new concrete wall. But you get location points, and you get browser searches, because people always search their sins. He has queries for hotel lock models, firmware versions, how to clear audits, how to reset lock clocks. He has a bookmarked listing for a so-called hotel lock tester tool. He has watched videos on latch shimming, framed as locksmith training. Congratulations. He did not fall into this. He studied it like a night class. Then you get the plate enhancement back from the gas station footage. It is still ugly. Math cannot invent pixels, but it gives you enough to confirm the van plate matches the registration tied to the subcontractor. Not just a maybe, a match that will survive cross-examination. Now you have the man, the van, the tools, and the method. And still you do not have your victim. So you stop thinking about doors and start thinking about bodies. You go to the drainage easement again, but this time you treat it like a transfer point. You look for vehicle access. You look for tire ruts near the embankment, the kind a van leaves when it noses close. You find a set of faint tracks, dried now, with a tread pattern that matches the van tires. Not perfect, but consistent. You find a broken zip tie near the brush line, the heavy-duty kind used for cable bundles. It has a tiny smear on it, not enough to identify by eyeball, but enough to swab. You bag it, and you feel your chest tighten again, because zip ties are not maintenance, they are control. Now you bring search teams back out. Wider. You grid the industrial strip and the service roads behind it. You check dumpsters. You check vacant lots. You check the kind of places where people dump things they do not want to carry. And you do it knowing you are late, because every hour is a thief. While the search runs, you work the paperwork side, because paperwork is a weapon too. You get warrants for the prepaid cards if possible. And you already know the answer. Prepaid cards are designed to be faceless, but sometimes they get used online, and online use leaves shipping addresses, email logins, and impatience. You pull the transaction history. One card was used to buy a digital gift code. The other was used to pay a phone bill, and that phone bill is linked to a second number. A burner, but not burned enough. That second number shows contact with one person repeatedly in the weeks before the hotel incident. A friend, a girlfriend, a fence. You do not know yet. You run her name. No violent history, just a string of small fraud complaints, the kind that never sticks because everyone is embarrassed. You bring her in. She sits in the same fluorescent box, and she looks like someone who thought petty scams were the worst she would ever touch. You show her the stills. She recognizes him immediately because of course she does. She says he fixes things. She says he is smart. She says he is always talking about how hotels are easy. She says he hates rich people. She says he calls it balancing the scales, like theft is a charity. You ask if she has ever seen him bring home wallets or cards. She says no. Then she says sometimes he has gift cards, and he tells her not to ask. You ask about the wrapped hand. She says he heard it a month ago, hitting something. Not someone, she says quickly. Something. A wall, a door, a car hood. Anger has many surfaces. Now you press where it matters. You ask her about the night of the hotel. She says he was not home. She says he said he had an overnight job. She says he came back around sunrise, sweaty, quiet, and he went straight to the shower. You ask if that is normal? She says no. She says he usually eats first, talks first, complains first. But that morning he was silent, and he threw away his clothes in the outside bin. Congratulations. Now you have post-crime behavior, the kind juries understand. Without a diagram, you ask her if she knows where he goes. When he wants privacy, she hesitates, then gives you an address, a storage facility off the highway, a unit in his name. You already pulled that in your warrant, but hearing it from a human mouth makes it feel more real. You roll the storage unit with a team and a locksmith because the universe loves irony. The hallway smells like dust and cardboard and hot padlocks. You open the unit and your flashlight beam hits stacked plastic bins, a folding chair, a toolbox, and a bundle of uniforms on hangers. Not one uniform, several. Maintenance polos from different vendors, different logos. Elevator company, security company, a generic hotel engineering shirt, and in a bin labeled cables, you find laminated badge sleeves, blank, with clip reels, costumes, ready to go. Then you find the second thing that is not supposed to be there, a box of hotel keycards, not generic now,